In the explanation about front projection mapping, we use an image of an old building in a cityscape. This time we're going to use a front lawn. We're going to put a car on top of it. And we're also going to add something that will help marry the image to the background. We're going to add in a shadow. So we've got our image loaded. Go to our backdrop, compositing, put our image in the background. Once again, we will go into our display properties, select background image to show, and back to our camera view. Background image, and there we are. The object we're going to load is a 57 Chevy Bel Air. This is an object that is supplied with Lightwave in the content directory. The only change that I made to it was that I put all the layers of the car, the individual layers, in a single layer just purely for convenience. I'm going to rotate the car to give us a nice side view of it. Let's try that. I'm now going to move the camera. This car object, if we take a look at the right side, we can see it's pretty much resting. It is resting right on the 0 for the Y. In fact, I'm going to center that. And I should have turned off my Y channel. No, I should have left it right where it was. Okay, and now I'm going to turn off the Y channel to prevent myself from making any other mistakes on that axis. Move it over here. So we're pretty well centered. Now, the Lightwave grid. Now, this is representing the ground plane. And that's really convenient when you're trying to set up a composite, because when you're looking at your image, big grass here, that's like also our ground plane. So we're kind of trying to match this grid with the ground plane we see in the background. And to kind of match it, I think I'm going to tilt it a little bit to kind of match the camera. And it appears to me that the background, the right side here, is a little higher than the left side. So I'm going to tilt it a little bit, and just very slightly, not even a full degree. Looks like it'd be about -0.5 degree, and that matches it pretty nicely. Now, the reason I'm using the camera to match it, to match my background, is that kind of sets up, now when I load things into the scene, I don't have to try to match the rotation of the car and then the ground plane I'll be adding and whatever other geometry I may be adding. They'll all come in and they'll all be zeroed out and they should be fine. So the first thing we're going to do is add a ground plane. Okay, it's too small. I just need to size it up. And I'll do that just by using size. Now I'm going to be using front projection mapping, so I don't really care about a lot of things. For instance, the scale of it, the image will not change. Front projection mapping completely ignores the geometry of the object, the scale, the rotation, because it's like a projector shining on something. Let's take a quick rendering of this scene right now and see what we have so far. I've just loaded the image, and it's just plopped on top of the background. It does not look like it's part of the scene at all. The lighting is wrong. There's no shadowing on the ground. We just have this big gray square. So let's change a couple of things. First of all, the light. Now I'm looking at my background image, trying to get a cue for how the light is coming in. It looks like it is probably angled a little more like this, maybe a little more straight on. Let's try that. And also let's turn on ray trace shadows. do another quick rendering. So we've changed the light, we've turned on shadows. We have not done anything to the surface of the ground plane. That will be next. But first we're going to check our lighting and our shadows. And it is still not really in the scene, but it does have a sense, a little more of a sense of it actually being there. Because of the shadows, this big gray plane is very unnatural. But the angle of the shadows, if I take the cue from what we're seeing in the background, not too bad. It is pretty harsh direct sunlight, so the distant light is not doing too bad of a job. Of course, we all like soft shadows, but it's just something we learn to deal with. So let's go into the next step, which is putting a front projection map on the ground surface. So I like my ground surface, the lawn image, which is popped onto there. See, planar map doesn't do it, even if we do it on the Y. It looks nice, but it doesn't really match up. We're going to go with front projection mapping, so it's completely registered with the background image. Another quick render, and we'll see what kind of results we get. Now the image mapped on the plane is a front projection map, which means it'll be registered completely with the background. As you can see, the individual blades of grass and the leaves here. However, the lighting is all off. Now we're coming into a problem, though. The problem is, previously, when we used front projection mapping with the buildings, we set our luminosity to 100%, our diffuse to 0. Well, that does a good job at matching our front projection map image with the background. However, if you tell a surface to completely ignore the effects of light, one of the things you're going to lose is your shadow. Our object's still in there. In fact, we can see it right here. However, our shadow is gone because we told it to completely ignore diffuse information. So what do we do now? Well, this is where things start getting tricky. There are a couple of things you can do. The classic way of dealing with it is to start balancing your diffuse and luminosity. So with 0 luminosity, 100% diffuse, it's too dark. Something many people don't realize is you can have more than 100% in your diffuse. If I set up 150, it's overreacting to the light. So it's still a little bit too dark. Let's try 175. And I can kind of eyeball it just in my layout here. That's actually looking pretty close. So if we do a quick render, and compositing, once again, is another one of those things where each job is different. Every time you do a compositing job, your settings are going to be slightly different or majorly different, just because pretty much every compositing job comes in will be different. Now, just by eyeballing it, a sharp eye will be able to spot that there's a line in here. However, it's pretty close, and there is the trick where you can map an edge that has kind of a frame with a white feathered edge and use that as transparency, and it blends it in. Now, I just upped my diffuse. The problem is with that is my shadows are way too dark. You can see even though this area here is in the shadows, it's still being fairly well illuminated. Here it's almost completely black. The only reason we're seeing anything at all is because there's a certain amount of ambient light, because I haven't really adjusted the light. So I'm going to go in, take this back down to 100. Instead of upping my diffuse, I'm going to up my luminosity. And once again, pretty much by pure chance, I found a setting that looks like it blends the two areas. 100% diffuse with 50% luminosity. And we'll do a quick render here, and we'll see how that matches. And I think we're going to see a slightly different look to the shadow. because it's only 100% diffuse, but we've got 50% luminosity, so it's illuminating itself even though it's in a shadow. Now I can see right here we've got a much lighter shadow. In fact, I would say too light for this. So somewhere between what I had before and what I have now would be a pretty decent setting. So I know a combination 100% diffuse with 50% luminosity. So let's take the luminosity down by half, but then put another 25% up to the diffuse. That's looking just a little bit dark, so we'll go 130. And another quick render. So what this is showing is how we add shadows to our composite. We put an object in, and generally that object is called a shadow catching object. And we're getting pretty close here. We can see, looks like it's still a little bit too light. Something that far underneath would probably be a lot darker, but we can see it. Our wheels actually are sinking through the grass a little bit because the plane is intersecting the wheels. Let's take a quick look at that. Yeah, we can see the wheels are slightly going through the plane. As long as we're discussing that, why don't we just have the car object slightly sinking into the grass. And I think that'll help sell the composite just a little bit more. Now let's make it a little more extreme. And see the light, give it this light more angle. Now if I change the angle of the light, we should see it, there we go. Because the plane is reacting to the angle of the light. This is a distant light. I'm not going to have to go in and reset my balance of luminosity and diffuse. So I need a little more diffuse, a little bit more luminosity. Get us back into the ballpark. Oh, extra digits. Let's try that. And there we are. Not exact. Another thing to be aware of, it might look okay or close enough on your computer monitor. If this is going out to video, I would suggest double checking it on some kind of video monitor, because something that may not show up on one monitor may possibly show up on another. Now I can see that my shadow is way too light. I'm going to do some quick adjustments. I will be rendering this image with anti-aliasing turned on to give us a nice looking image. Another thing that I found is when you're compositing, this is about the only time I use the soft filter, and that's when I'm in a hurry and I need it to be done quickly. Today I would normally render things out in layers, and I would use some kind of blur filter in my compositing program just because I have so much more control. However, for quick and dirty stuff, if you just want to do it one time through, the soft filters, especially for display purposes, it takes a lot of the edge off of the 3D and tends to make it blend into the background a little more. So here we have the image rendered at low anti-aliasing, sinking into the grass just a little bit. Not entirely working for me because there should be, you should see tracks coming here, wouldn't you? But that's something for another time. The lighting's not too bad. It's killing me that I don't have a second, say, blue light in here, and maybe make my key light a little bit yellow. But once again, that's for the more advanced sections of this CD. The one thing I would like to add here, though, is one thing to really help marry this to the scene. It'd be nice if it was reflecting a little bit. So I've got my Viper open here, So I'm going to open up my surface editor with my Viper. Select the side surface. It's got some reflection to it. Go into my environment. And I'm going to do ray tracing plus spherical map. Actually, I think maybe I'll just go straight with spherical map and select the lawn background. And what will happen now is it will use that image as a reflection map. And I'm going to go in and do that with a number of the other surfaces. And we can see right in our Viper that it's, oh, we got a nice blur there. Let's go back to the lawn because that's kind of the scene that it's in. So here's the car rendered at low anti-aliasing, shadows turned on, and all I did was apply the same background image as the reflection map. It just took me a couple of seconds, and it's much more realistic. This is the default settings as it came in. This is using my background image as a reflection map. Let's take a look at our image controls, put one in the foreground and the background. Nice little control here that most people don't know about in Lightwave. Allows us to kind of wipe past and see the image, the before and the after. As with our background reflection map, and that is without. So you can see with the reflection map a much more believable composite, much more married. Now we should go in and we should adjust our level of reflection here, and we can actually do that right in Viper. You can see Viper actually is matching our rendering pretty closely. So you'd want to go in, adjust your diffuse and your reflection levels, but this is not too bad of a composite. We've got our ground plane is casting shadows on the ground plane. The reflections in the object are reflecting the environment. To my eyes, the shadow still isn't quite right, and I don't like the sharp edge of the wheel sinking into the grass. There should be a couple of random things there. I could take some small squares, put it in front of there, map some clip maps in front, just so it's not a flat image like it is, but still, it is pretty much in the ballpark.